He called her worthless, shameful, a fucking joke. How could I marry a black woman like you? Richard's hand cracked across Emma's face, the slap echoing through the family dinner. The sound cut sharper than the silver knives, humiliation spilling across the white tablecloth. His mother carved her steak in silence. His secretary smirked. Richard's chest shook with a cruel laugh as Emma sat perfectly still, the image of obedience. But no one at that table, not even Richard, realized she wasn't powerless. Behind her composure lived a plan forged over years, a hidden force that could dismantle the empire he flaunted. And in that moment, as his hand fell away, the first fracture appeared in his arrogance. The woman he thought he could break was already preparing the reckoning he would never see coming. Dawson Enterprises occupied 40 floors of Manhattan's most prestigious tower. From the outside, it gleamed like a monument to American success. Inside, it rotted with secrets. Emma Dawson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive wing, watching the city 20 stories below. Her reflection stared back, a ghost in her own life. 15 years married to Richard Dawson. 15 years of being the only black face in family portraits. Except she wasn't in the portraits. Not one. Mrs. Dawson? The voice belonged to Marcus Thompson, the company's chief legal counsel, one of the few who still called her by her title. The board meeting is in an hour. She nodded, not turning. Marcus had been with the company for 20 years. He'd seen everything, known everything, kept quiet about everything. The Dawson family controlled one of America's last great private empires. Real estate, technology, media, $3 billion in assets. 500 employees, one woman they pretended didn't exist. Richard's office door burst open down the hall. His voice carried, it always did. I don't care what the contracts say. Fire them all if they complain about hours again. Emma's fingers traced the window. Once, she'd been Emma Williams, Harvard Law, top of her class. She'd met Richard at a charity gala. He'd been charming then. Pursued her relentlessly. Told her she was different from other women, special. She'd believed him. The prenuptial agreement had been her first warning. Just a formality, Richard had said. But Emma had read every line. She knew what she was signing. More importantly, she knew what she wasn't signing. Your husband requests your presence at lunch, Jessica Monroe announced from the doorway. Richard's secretary wore Prada, always Prada. The kind of clothes a secretary shouldn't afford. Tell him I'll be there, Emma replied. Jessica lingered. He also said to remind you about appropriate conversation topics. The Morrison clients will be joining. Appropriate, meaning silent. Emma had saved Dawson Enterprises once. 2019. The company hemorrhaged money after a failed expansion. Richard had been desperate, though he'd never admitted it. Emma had worked 18-hour days, restructuring contracts, finding loopholes, negotiating with creditors. She'd pulled them back from bankruptcy. The next day, Richard had introduced Jessica as the new strategic planning director, taking credit for Emma's salvation of the company. That's when Emma had started planning. Victoria Dawson swept into the hallway, her heels announcing her arrival before she appeared. Richard's mother, 73 years old and sharp as a surgical knife. She ruled the family's social empire while Richard ran the business. Emma, she said, the name sounding like an accusation, you're wearing the black Chanel again. Richard prefers it. Richard prefers many things. Victoria's eyes were ice. Some preferences matter more than others. The meaning was clear. Emma mattered least. In the private bathroom, Emma opened her hidden safe behind the mirror. Inside lay documents, contracts, recordings, 5 years of patient preparation. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Everything is ready, waiting for your signal. She deleted it immediately. At Harvard, Emma had studied more than law. She'd studied power, how it moves, how it hides, how it can be taken from those who abuse it. Her thesis had been on corporate takeovers through subsidiary accumulation. Her professor had called it brilliant but ruthless. He'd been half right. The lunch would be another performance. Emma would sit silently while Richard entertained clients. Jessica would lean too close, laugh too loud, touch his arm too often. Victoria would pretend not to notice. The clients would pretend not to notice. Everyone would pretend Emma wasn't there. But Emma had stopped pretending 5 years ago. In the safe, beneath the contracts, lay a single document, dated 5 years prior, notarized, witnessed, legally bulletproof. It transferred ownership of 47 subsidiary companies to an offshore corporation in the Cayman Islands, a corporation with one shareholder, Emma Dawson. Those subsidiaries, through a complex web of holdings, controlled 90% of Dawson Enterprises. Richard thought he owned an empire. He owned nothing. Emma closed the safe, fixed her lipstick, straightened her dress. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The annual Dawson Enterprises Gala sparkled with lies. 500 guests, $50 million in collective wealth. One woman everyone pretended not to see. Emma descended the marble staircase alone. Richard waited at the bottom with Jessica Monroe on his arm. His secretary wore scarlet, the color of blood, of warning, of things that shouldn't be. "You're late," Richard said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "The car service—" "Excuses." He turned to Jessica. "This is why I need someone reliable by my side." The crowd pretended not to watch, but everyone was watching. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Emma took her assigned seat, table 12, the furthest from the stage where Richard would speak. Jessica sat at table 1, in the seat marked Mrs. Dawson. Nobody questioned it. During cocktails, Emma stood alone by the wall. Donors walked past her. Board members looked through her. She held champagne she didn't drink, wore diamonds that felt like chains. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's voice boomed through speakers, "welcome to our celebration of excellence." He stood at the podium, Jessica beside him. The spotlight made his silver hair gleam, made her smile shine, made Emma invisible in the shadows. "This year, Dawson Enterprises grew by 40%. Applause thundered. "We couldn't have done it without our incredible leadership team." He named everyone, the CFO, the COO, the directors, Jessica Monroe, whose strategic vision transformed our operations. Not Emma. Never Emma. "Some of you might wonder," Richard continued, his eyes finding Emma across the room, "how we maintain such high standards. It's simple. We don't accept mediocrity, we don't make excuses, and we don't let anyone drag us down to their level." Laughter rippled through the crowd, uncomfortable but complicit. Victoria Dawson stood near Emma, speaking loudly to another society matron. "Of course, we make allowances for Richard's charitable nature. He's always had a weakness for, shall we say, diversity projects." Emma's hand tightened on her glass. "Mrs. Dawson," a server appeared. "Mr. Dawson requests your presence on stage." The room turned to watch her walk. 500 pairs of eyes tracking the black woman in the black dress moving through an ocean of white faces. On stage, Richard gripped her arm, hard, smiled for the cameras. "My wife, everyone," he announced. "She's lucky to be here, aren't you, Emma? Not many women like her get opportunities like this." Women like her. The words hung in the air like poison. "Tell them, Emma. Tell them how grateful you are." The microphone waited. The silence stretched. Emma could feel her phone recording in her clutch, could feel 5 years of preparation crystallizing into this moment. "I'm grateful," she said quietly, "for clarity." Richard's grip tightened. His smile never wavered. After the speech, Emma escaped to the bathroom. In the mirror, she saw what everyone else saw, a woman diminished, reduced, erased. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Thompson. "Phase 2, ready when you are." She typed back, "Initiate." In the ballroom, Richard held court with investors. Jessica draped herself over his shoulder, whispering in his ear. They laughed. Everyone laughed. "Emma!" Richard called out as she returned. "Jessica was just telling the Hendersons about her Harvard MBA. Isn't that impressive? Real credentials. Not like some people who just marry into success." Emma had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law. Jessica had a bachelor's from an online university. But truth didn't matter here. Power did. "You know," Victoria added, joining the group, "Jessica reminds me of what Richard could have had. Should have had." "Mother," Richard laughed, but his eyes were cold. "Let's not dwell on past mistakes." Emma stood there, silent, recording, waiting. At 11 p.m., Richard made his final announcement. "Next week's board meeting will be revolutionary. Major restructuring, new leadership positions. Some people will be relocated." His eyes found Emma. She smiled back. If only he knew what revolution really looked like. Memory is a knife that cuts both ways. Emma sat in her study at 3 a.m., surrounded by ghosts. 15 years ago. The Met Gala after-party. Emma Williams, 26, the youngest black woman ever hired by Cravath, Swain, and Moore. Richard Dawson, 35, heir to an empire, walked straight to her. "You're the lawyer who won the Pemberton case," he'd said. "You're the CEO who nearly lost it," she'd replied. He'd laughed, pursued her for months, flowers at her office, dinners at Le Bernardin, a Cartier bracelet she'd returned twice before finally accepting. "You're different," he'd told her. "You're not like them." She'd thought them meant other women. Later, she understood. 10 years ago, their 5th anniversary, Richard drunk on whiskey and power. "You know why I married you, don't you?" He'd stumbled against their bedroom wall. "Because a black wife makes me look progressive. Do you know how many deals that's won me?" Emma had stood there in her negligee, feeling naked in ways that had nothing to do with clothing. "But don't forget," he'd continued, "I made you. Without me, you'd be just another diversity hire pretending to belong." That night, Emma had called Marcus Thompson. The old lawyer had answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting. "I need to understand corporate structures," she'd said. "Subsidiaries, shell companies, everything." "Why?" "Because I'm going to take it all." 5 years ago, the bankruptcy crisis. Dawson Enterprises bleeding money. Richard desperate, terrified, vulnerable. Emma had worked 4 days straight, finding solutions, saving everything. "How?" Richard had asked, staring at the contracts that would rescue them. "I restructured through subsidiary transfers, created holding companies in the Caymans, moved assets through shells to protect them from creditors." He'd been too relieved to read carefully, too arrogant to imagine she'd betray him, too stupid to realize she already had. Every document he'd signed that day had transferred ownership, not to him, to her. Through 16 layers of corporate veils, Emma owned 90% of Dawson Enterprises. Marcus Thompson had notarized everything. "This is dangerous," he'd warned. "So is staying married to him." 3 years ago, Emma discovered the first affair, Jessica Monroe, security footage from Richard's office. Her phone had captured everything, their conversations, their plans, their contempt for her. "She actually thinks she matters," Jessica had laughed, straddling Richard on his desk. "Let her think that," Richard had replied. "It keeps her quiet, docile, under control." Emma had sat in her car for hours that night, not crying, planning. 1 year ago, her father's funeral, James Williams, janitor for 40 years, died of a heart attack in a building he'd never been allowed above the 3rd floor of. Emma had stood at his grave, remembering his words. "Baby girl, they'll never give you power. You have to take it. But when you do, take it all." Victoria hadn't allowed Emma to miss the quarterly board dinner for the funeral. "Priorities," she'd said. "Your little family drama can wait." Little family drama, her father, the man who'd worked 3 jobs to put her through Harvard. Last month, Emma had found the poison. Ricin, hidden in Jessica's desk drawer, along with searches on Jessica's computer. How to make death look natural. Untraceable poisons. Inheritance law, New York. Richard's will, she'd found that too. Newly revised. Everything to Jessica Monroe upon Emma's death. They weren't just planning to divorce her, they were planning to kill her. Emma closed the memory box. Outside, Manhattan glittered with false promises. Her phone showed 47 missed calls from Richard. Let him panic. Let him wonder where she was. Tomorrow, the emergency board meeting she'd called would convene. They thought they were gathering to discuss Richard's restructuring. They were gathering for an execution, a corporate one. Patience, her father had always said, is the revenge of the powerless. Emma wasn't powerless anymore. She was the storm they never saw coming. The surveillance footage played on Emma's laptop like a horror movie she couldn't stop watching. Richard's office. Tuesday, 2:47 p.m. Jessica Monroe straddling him on the conference table where million-dollar deals were signed. "She's pathetic," Jessica laughed, unbuttoning Richard's shirt. "Sitting in that big house, thinking she's Mrs. Dawson. She's nothing but a trophy you don't even polish anymore." "The trophy served its purpose," Richard replied, pulling Jessica closer. "Got me the progressive investors, the diversity awards, the government contracts that require minority partnerships." Emma paused the video. She had 17 more. Different days. Same desk, same betrayal. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number sent a photo. Jessica at a pharmacy. Emma zoomed in. Pregnancy test. The receipt timestamp, 3 hours ago. The house felt like a mausoleum at midnight. Emma walked the halls, counting secrets. In Richard's study, she found more. Emails between him and Jessica planning their future. "Once Emma's gone," one read, "we can finally be together properly." Gone. Such a simple word for murder. In the master bedroom, their wedding photo mocked her from the nightstand. Richard had insisted on displaying it. For appearances. Emma picked it up, studying her younger self. So much hope. So much faith in love conquering difference. Behind the photo, she found another document. A power of attorney. Predated. Waiting for her signature. Or perhaps waiting for someone to forge it. Wednesday morning brought new revelations. Emma followed Jessica to a townhouse in Brooklyn, watched her meet with a man in scrubs, Dr. Martin Kerr, according to the medical license plate frame. They embraced, kissed. Jessica showed him something on her phone. Both laughed. Emma's hidden camera in Jessica's car captured their conversation on the drive back. "Martin doesn't know about Richard?" Jessica's friend asked over speakerphone. "Martin thinks I'm single. Richard thinks he's my only one. Both give me what I need. And the pregnancy? Richard's. Confirmed yesterday. My insurance policy. Even if something goes wrong with Emma, I'll still get everything through the child." Emma's hands shook, not from hurt, from rage. That afternoon, Emma discovered the worst betrayal, Victoria's involvement. The family matriarch sat in the conservatory with Jessica, their voices carrying through hidden microphones Emma had planted months ago. "You understand," Victoria said. "Emma was never meant to be permanent. Richard needed her for the optics. The world was changing. We needed to seem inclusive. But now," Jessica poured tea like she belonged there. "Now we have enough progressive credibility. The contracts are secured. The partnership's established. Emma has outlived her usefulness. The poison is traceable if anyone looks too closely." Victoria's voice was ice. "I have a better way. Richard's been moving money offshore. Embezzling, technically, though he doesn't see it that way. Frame Emma for it. She goes to prison. Richard divorces her for cause. Clean, legal, final. Emma felt something die inside her. Then something else was born, something harder, hungrier. Thursday revealed the depth of Richard's financial crimes. $2 million monthly to accounts in Switzerland, another $1 million to Singapore. All traced back to subsidiaries Emma technically controlled. If she hadn't owned them secretly, she'd be legally liable. Marcus Thompson called. "They're setting you up. The FBI received an anonymous tip about the offshore accounts. They're investigating." "Let them come," Emma replied. "They'll find something interesting." She spent that night doctoring documents, not forging, revealing. Every transaction Richard made, she'd documented. Every crime preserved. Every betrayal archived. Friday brought the pregnancy announcement. Jessica told Richard at lunch in front of Emma. "I'm having your baby," she said, like discussing weather. Richard's face cycled through emotions: shock, panic, calculation, decision. "That's wonderful," he said finally, reaching for Jessica's hand. Right there, in front of his wife. Emma stood. "Congratulations. I'm sure Victoria will be thrilled." She left them there, walked to her car, and screamed. Not from pain, from liberation. They'd finally freed her from any obligation to show mercy. In her safe room, the one place in the house Richard didn't know existed, Emma compiled everything: videos, emails, financial records, medical fraud. Jessica had been billing Richard's insurance for psychiatric sessions that never happened, splitting the money with Dr. Kerr. Her phone rang. "Richard, where are you? Does it matter?" "There's a board meeting Monday. Emergency session. Some nonsense about corporate restructuring. You need to be there. Silent, but there. The optics." "The optics," Emma laughed. "Of course." "And Emma? Wear the black Chanel. You look less aggressive in it." "Less aggressive. Less black," he meant. "Richard?" Emma's voice was honey over steel. "What would you do if you lost everything?" "What?" "Just curious. What would you do if you woke up with nothing?" He laughed. "That's why I have you, isn't it? My insurance policy, my diversity shield, my—" Emma hung up. Saturday night, she sat in Marcus Thompson's office. The old lawyer looked tired but determined. "Everything's ready," he said. "The board doesn't know what's coming. The FBI is holding off until after Monday. I called in a favor. The subsidiary documentation is ironclad. But Emma—" He paused. "Once you do this, there's no going back." There never was. Sunday morning, the final insult. Emma found them in her bed. Her bed, Richard and Jessica tangled in sheets she'd bought, in the room where she'd cried herself to sleep for years. They didn't even notice her watching, too lost in their conquest of her space. Emma took a photo, not for evidence, for strength, to remember why mercy was not an option. She walked to the kitchen, made coffee, sat at the marble island where Richard had proposed 10 years ago. Her phone showed one new message, from Jessica's phone, but not Jessica's words. It was a draft text accidentally shared through the cloud sync. "Once the old bitch is gone and Emma's in prison, it'll just be us." The old bitch, Victoria. They were planning to betray her too. Emma smiled. It was almost poetic. The predators devouring each other. Tomorrow, at the board meeting, she would stand up. She would speak. And the Dawson Empire would discover what happened when you pushed someone too far. She opened her laptop, sent one email, subject line: "The revolution will be notarized." The recipient: every board member. The attachment: everything. Almost everything. She saved the best revelation for the meeting itself, Sunday night. Emma stood in Richard's private office, the one he thought was secure. The one with the Van Gogh reproduction hiding a safe he believed only he knew about. The combination was their anniversary date. Of course it was. Richard's arrogance made him predictable. Inside, contracts, cash, and a recording device, his insurance policy, he'd once called it, for difficult negotiations. Emma plugged in her USB. Every conversation from the past 2 years began downloading. "Richard, she's getting suspicious. Jessica's voice from 6 months ago. Let her suspect. What's she going to do? She has nothing. She is nothing. Just a signature on documents and a face for photos. But if she finds out about the offshore, she won't. She's smart enough to know her place. And if she forgets? A pause. Accidents happen, even to careful people. Emma's hand stayed steady as she photographed each document. The fraudulent contracts, the embezzlement records, the falsified board minutes. Each page was another nail in Richard's coffin. Her phone vibrated. Marcus Thompson. Security guard asking about lights in the office. Tell him it's the cleaning crew. In the bottom of the safe, beneath stacks of euros, a medical document. Emma's medical document. Except she'd never seen it before. Patient shows signs of severe mental instability, it read. Recommend immediate psychiatric hold if behavior escalates. Signed by Dr. Martin Kerr, Jessica's secret boyfriend, dated tomorrow. They were planning to have her committed. Tomorrow, after the board meeting. Emma photographed everything, then found something else. A contract between Richard and a consulting firm in Moscow. The FBI would be very interested in that. The services listed were vague. The payments were not. $50 million for strategic advisement. Richard was selling company secrets to foreign interests. In the locked drawer of his desk, the one he didn't know she'd copied the key to, lay Jessica's employment file, her real one. The one showing she'd been fired from 3 previous companies for fraud. The one Richard had buried when he hired her. But the real smoking gun waited in Richard's personal laptop. Emma had installed a keystroke logger months ago. His password, Money Power 1 and 23. Pathetic. The emails loaded, hundreds. Between Richard, Jessica, and someone named V. V was Victoria. Emma problem needs permanent solution, Victoria had written 3 weeks ago. Working on it. MK will certify. Facility ready, Jessica replied. Once committed, power of attorney automatic. Move quickly, from Richard. They weren't just planning to kill her or frame her. They were planning to declare her insane, lock her away, and take everything while she rotted in an asylum. Emma filmed herself opening each email. Time-stamped. Witnessed by the security camera she'd made sure was recording. Then she found the video file. Hidden, encrypted. But Richard used the same password for everything. It opened to show Richard and 2 men she recognized, board members, discussing something that made her blood freeze. The government contract requires minority ownership, one said. Emma's ownership is enough on paper, Richard replied. Once she's gone, we'll maintain the fiction. A dead black woman still counts as diversity, right? They laughed. And the FBI investigation? Pinned on her, the angry black wife stealing from her successful white husband? They'll believe it. They always do. Emma copied everything to 3 separate drives. One for the FBI, one for the SEC, one for herself. As she prepared to leave, she noticed something else. A life insurance policy, on her, for $50 million. Richard was the beneficiary. It had been increased last month. The final piece clicked. They weren't going to declare her insane. That was the backup plan. The primary plan was simpler. Murder, made to look like suicide. A mentally unstable woman caught embezzling takes her own life rather than face prison. The policy had a suicide clause, but it expired in 2 days. They were going to kill her tomorrow night, after the board meeting, after she'd been publicly humiliated one last time. Emma smiled. It was almost amusing how badly they'd underestimated her. She left everything exactly as she'd found it, except for one thing. She placed a single document on Richard's desk, the incorporation papers for a Cayman Islands company, EW Holdings, established 5 years ago, owner of 90% of Dawson Enterprises. Let him find it in the morning. Let him panic. Let him know that death had come for his empire, and her name was Emma Dawson. Monday, 9 a.m. The boardroom of Dawson Enterprises had never been quieter. 12 board members sat frozen, staring at the emails Emma had sent at midnight. Richard burst through the doors 30 seconds later, his face the color of old bone. "This is fraud," he shouted, waving the Cayman documents. "She's lying. She's sitting right here," Emma said. Every head turned. Emma stood at the far end of the table, no longer in the black Chanel. She wore white, pure, blazing white, a resurrection suit. "You're not supposed to be here," Richard stammered. "I called this meeting." Emma walked forward, her heels striking marble like a judge's gavel. "As the majority shareholder of Dawson Enterprises." "That's impossible." "Is it?" Marcus Thompson entered, wheeling boxes of documents. 5 years ago, Mr. Dawson signed 17 documents during the restructuring. Each transferred subsidiary ownership to offshore holdings. Those holdings roll up to EW Holdings, which Ms. Emma Dawson owns entirely. "You're my wife. What's yours is mine." "Actually," Emma pulled out their prenuptial agreement, "according to this, all assets acquired through individual business ventures remain separate property. Your words, Richard. Your contract." The board members looked between them like spectators at an execution. "This is conspiracy," Richard's voice cracked. "She manipulated me when I was vulnerable." "Like you manipulated me for 15 years? Emma's voice could have frozen hell. "Let's discuss manipulation, Richard. Should we start with the psychiatric hold papers? Or the murder plot?" She pressed play on her phone. Richard's voice filled the room. "Once she's gone, we'll maintain the fiction. A dead black woman still counts as diversity, right?" Board member Charles Morrison stood up. "Richard, what the hell is this?" "It's nothing. It's out of context." Emma played another recording. Jessica's voice. "The poison is ready Tuesday night after she signs the papers. That's fake." "The FBI doesn't think so." Emma nodded to the door. 2 agents entered, badges visible. "They've been investigating your offshore accounts, Richard, the ones you tried to frame me for. Turns out, stealing $50 million and selling secrets to Moscow are federal crimes." "You bitch!" Richard lunged across the table. Security guards, ones Emma had hired that morning, restrained him. "Mrs. Dawson," board member Patricia Reeves spoke carefully, "are you saying you own 90% of this company?" "I'm saying I've owned it for 5 years. I've been silent while Richard destroyed value, abused employees, and committed fraud. But silence is over." "You can't do this!" Victoria Dawson stood in the doorway, shaking with rage. "You're nothing! You're nobody! I'm your son's largest creditor." Emma turned to her. "Did you know Richard borrowed against his shares? $40 million in personal loans secured by stock he no longer owns, due immediately upon change of control." Victoria's face went white. "As for you," Emma faced Jessica, who'd been trying to slip out. "Dr. Martin Kerr is in custody. He's already confessing to the insurance fraud. The pregnancy? Congratulations. You'll be raising that child alone, from prison." Jessica ran. The FBI agents followed. Emma returned to the board. "Gentlemen, ladies, you have 2 choices. Support my immediate installation as CEO, or I liquidate the company today. Your shares will be worth nothing." "This is blackmail," Richard screamed. "No, it's business." Emma pulled out her final document. "The Shareholder Agreement, Section 47B. Any shareholder owning more than 51% can demand immediate board replacement. I own 90. "How?" Morrison asked, genuinely stunned. "How did we not know?" "Because you never looked at me." Emma's voice carried 15 years of pain transformed into power. "I was furniture, background, the black wife who made Richard look progressive. You never imagined I could think, plan, win." "The subsidiaries." Reeves was reading the documents. "My God. You structured this perfectly. It's completely legal." "I had an excellent teacher." Emma glanced at Richard. "He showed me exactly how to hide ownership through shell companies. I just did it better." The board voted. Unanimous. They had no choice. "Richard Dawson," Emma said, standing at the head of the table he'd ruled from for a decade. "You're fired. Security will escort you out. I'll destroy you. You'll do nothing. You are nothing. Just an empty suit with a famous name and a mountain of debt." Emma smiled. "Funny. Those are the same words you used about me on our anniversary." As security dragged Richard out, Emma looked at the board. "Tomorrow we rebuild. Today?" She glanced at her watch. "Today we take out the trash." The boardroom doors slammed shut. Emma Dawson stood alone at the head of the table. The Queen had taken the throne. The transformation of Dawson Enterprises began at 9:47 a.m. Emma's first act as CEO wasn't about revenge. It was about resurrection. "Marcus," she said to the old lawyer, "bring them in." The door opened. 50 employees entered, the ones Richard had planned to fire for complaining about hours, the ones who'd worked unpaid overtime, the ones passed over for promotions because they weren't the right color, the right gender, the right pedigree. "Effective immediately," Emma announced. "All unpaid overtime will be compensated. Triple rate, retroactive 5 years. Gasps rippled through the room. "Ms. Johnson," Emma addressed the head of HR, "how many discrimination complaints have been buried in the past decade?" 47, the woman whispered, fearful of answering. "Review them all. Settle them, generously. And Johnson, you're fired. Mr. Williams will be taking your position." She nodded to Jerome Williams, no relation, despite the name, who'd been passed over for promotion 17 times. The old guard protested. "You can't just—" "I own 90% of this company. Watch me." By noon, Emma had dismantled Richard's entire power structure. The executives who'd laughed at his racist jokes, gone. The managers who'd helped hide his embezzlement, terminated. The board members who'd known about the discrimination but stayed silent, replaced. "This is corporate suicide," Charles Morrison shouted. "No, this is corporate chemotherapy, cutting out the cancer so the body can heal." Emma's phone rang. "Richard, from the lobby. You're destroying my family's legacy." "I'm saving it from you." She put him on speaker for the room to hear. "Your father built this company on innovation. You turned it into a monument to mediocrity and corruption. When I get out of federal prison, that'll be 15 to 20 years. Your lawyers just called. They're dropping you. Can't afford them anymore, can you? Not with your accounts frozen." The line went dead. Victoria arrived at 2 p.m., trying to storm past security. "This is my building. My husband's name is on it." "Was on it," Emma corrected, meeting her in the lobby. "The board voted. It's now the Emma Williams Dawson Tower." "You can't erase us." "I'm not erasing you. I'm correcting you. There's a difference." Emma handed her a document. "Your personal accounts, the ones you thought were hidden. The FBI found them interesting. All that money you helped Richard steal, it's being returned to the employees you robbed." Victoria aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "I'll have nothing. You'll have what you gave me for 15 years. Contempt, isolation, invisibility. See how it feels." By 3 p.m., the news had broken. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Every network carried the same story. Black woman reveals she secretly owned 90% of husband's billion-dollar empire. Emma held a press conference at 4. "For 15 years, she began, standing where Richard once stood, I was told I was nothing, that I should be grateful for scraps, that my place was in the shadows. But shadows are where you learn to see clearly, where you plan, where you prepare." "Mrs. Dawson," a reporter called, "your husband claims this is theft." "My ex-husband, divorce papers were filed at noon, stole $50 million from this company. I'm returning every penny to the employees and shareholders he robbed." "What about Jessica Monroe?" "In custody, along with Dr. Martin Kerr and 6 other conspirators. Attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement. The FBI has enough to keep them busy for years." "What's your plan for the company?" Emma smiled. Watch. She unveiled the new corporate structure on live television. Profit sharing for all employees, paid family leave, real leave, not the joke Richard had offered. Diversity requirements with teeth, not quotas, but real investment in finding and developing talent Richard had ignored. But the most important change? Emma looked directly into the cameras. Transparency. Every executive salary will be public. Every board decision will be recorded. Every discrimination complaint will be investigated by an independent committee. The stock price surged 20% in after-hours trading. At 6 p.m., Emma walked through the offices. Employees who'd hidden from Richard emerged. The black janitor who'd worked there 30 years, like her father had, stopped her. Miss Dawson? My daughter? She just graduated law school. Richard wouldn't even look at her resume. Send it to my office, not HR, directly to me. By 7, Emma stood in Richard's former office, her office now. The portraits of dead white Dawsons had been removed. In their place, photos of the employees, the real company, the people who actually built the empire. Jessica's desk had been cleared out. Inside, they'd found more poison, more plots, more evidence of what Emma had escaped by days, maybe hours. Marcus Thompson knocked. The FBI wants to know if you'll testify. Every word, in open court. Let the world hear what they did. It'll be ugly. They'll attack you, call you bitter, vengeful, the angry black woman who destroyed a good man. Emma turned to face the city. Her city now. Let them. I've been called worse, and I'm still here. The sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky the color of revolution. Emma Dawson had won. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan had seen powerful men fall before, but never quite like this. Richard Dawson entered in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at wrists and ankles. 3 months since the boardroom coup. 3 months of his world collapsing pixel by pixel, dollar by dollar, connection by connection. Mr. Dawson, the prosecutor began, you're charged with embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and treason. Treason. The Moscow papers had been worse than anyone imagined. Richard hadn't just sold company secrets, he'd sold classified government contract information. How do you plead? Richard's court-appointed attorney, the kind who worked from a briefcase, not a corner office, whispered urgently in his ear. Not guilty. Richard's voice cracked like teenage pride. From the gallery, Emma watched, not with satisfaction, with something colder, justice. The bail hearing was brief. Flight risk, the judge declared. Bail denied. Richard screamed as they dragged him away. Emma, please, I'm sorry. I'll give you everything. You already did, she said quietly. 5 years ago. Jessica Monroe's trial came next. The woman who'd worn Prada now wore county jail gray. Her pregnancy showed, 5 months along, no designer maternity wear, no glow. Just a woman realizing her child would be born in custody. Ms. Monroe, you're charged with attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Jessica sobbed. The tears that had once manipulated Richard meant nothing to Judge Harrison. The defendant purchased ricin, the prosecutor read, researched untraceable poisons, drafted texts about killing Emma Dawson. It was Richard's idea, Jessica screamed. He made me. He promised me everything. Dr. Martin Kerr took the stand against her. Her secret boyfriend had flipped immediately, trading testimony for a lighter sentence. Jessica planned everything. She said Emma was the only thing standing between her and billions. You bastard! Jessica lunged at him. Guards restrained her. You said you loved me. I loved your money, Martin replied. The money you never actually had. 15 years. That was Jessica's sentence. Her baby would be raised by the state until Martin's mother, the only relative who'd take responsibility, could claim custody. Victoria Dawson didn't get a criminal trial. Her collapse was quieter, more complete. The IRS seized everything: the Hampton estate, the Manhattan penthouse, The art collection. Every asset purchased with stolen money was reclaimed. Emma found her at a homeless shelter in Queens, not out of cruelty, out of duty. One last conversation. Come to gloat? Victoria sat on a thin mattress, her designer clothes replaced by goodwill donations. Come to offer you a job. Victoria's head snapped up. Janitor. At Dawson Enterprises, minimum wage, night shift. Emma's voice held no emotion. It's honest work. More honest than you ever were. You expect me to clean toilets? I expect you to understand what real work feels like, what the people you despised for 15 years actually do. Victoria's pride warred with her desperation. Desperation won. I'll take it. Good. You start Monday. Don't be late. I don't tolerate excuses. Emma turned to leave, then paused. My father was a janitor. He died with more dignity than your entire family ever lived with. The smaller fish fell quickly. Board members who'd known about the embezzlement were forced to resign in disgrace. Executives who'd participated faced charges. The entire corrupt ecosystem Richard had built was torn down, person by person, scheme by scheme. Richard's final court appearance came in December, guilty on all charges. The judge, a black woman who'd worked her way up from poverty, showed no mercy. Mr. Dawson, you represent the worst of American privilege. You had everything, wealth, power, opportunity, and you used it to steal, abuse, and attempt murder. You treated your wife like property, your employees like slaves, and your country like a commodity to be sold. Your Honor, silence. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for 15. 15 years. The exact length of Richard and Emma's marriage. As they led Richard away, he looked back one last time. Emma sat in the gallery, wearing white again. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. Just watched the man who'd tried to destroy her disappear into the system that would destroy him. Outside the courthouse, snow began to fall. Emma stood on the steps where Richard had once proclaimed his innocence to reporters. Now, she said nothing, her silence more powerful than any speech. The empire of abuse had fallen. From its ashes, something better was already growing. 1 year later, the Emma Williams Dawson Tower gleamed with new purpose. Emma stood in what had been Richard's office, watching the city wake beneath her. The room had been transformed. Gone were the dark woods and hunting trophies. In their place, light, air, and photographs of every employee. 500 faces, 500 stories. Ms. Dawson, Jerome Williams entered, her new COO. The scholarship committee is ready. The Emma Williams Foundation, named for her father, not herself. 20 full rides to Harvard Law for black women from working-class families. The first recipients waited in the conference room. Young women who reminded Emma of herself 15 years ago. Brilliant, ambitious, underestimated. Before we go in, Emma said, tell me about the numbers. Stock up 60%. Employee satisfaction at 92%. We've promoted 43 people Richard overlooked. Hired 70 more he would have rejected. And Victoria? Still cleaning. Never missed a shift. The other janitors say she works harder than anyone. Emma nodded. Redemption came in many forms. In the conference room, 20 young women rose as she entered. Their eyes held hunger, not for wealth, but for chance. Sit, Emma said. First lesson, never stand for anyone who hasn't earned it. She looked at each face, saw her father, saw herself, saw the future. You're here because someone told you no, because someone said you didn't belong, because someone tried to make you small. Emma's voice carried across the room. Good. Anger is fuel. Pain is a teacher. But revenge, she smiled. Revenge is success they never saw coming. One girl raised her hand. Ms. Dawson, how did you stay silent for so long? How did you not break? Emma touched the window, her reflection merging with the city beyond. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most dangerous. The dangerous one is taking notes. She turned back to them. Power isn't given, it's taken. Patience isn't passive, it's preparation. And justice? Emma's smile could have lit the darkness. Justice is inevitable if you're willing to play the long game. Remember, your silence today is your thunder tomorrow. The young women leaned forward, ready to learn, ready to rise, ready to roar.